I was watching a video on YouTube a few days ago. I was rewatching it actually. I first looked at it a few months ago. It was a video of Ken Wilber, who I have mixed feelings about, I have to say. But it was a video of himself talking to a group of people about Descartes and trying to give a kind of non-dualist reading of Descartes' writings. Of course, Descartes traditionally being associated very much with substance dualism, particularly, and a fairly radical separation of mind and body, or spirit and world, that kind of dualistic understanding. And there were some interesting things that Ken Wilber was suggesting in this video, but one of the things I found really striking was the way he was describing his point of view. What he was basically saying was, as far as I understand it, and this was a kind of, he was drawing on Vedanta, I think. He was saying that that the separation between mind and body, which Descartes identifies, parallels what you find in non-Western culture as an apparent dualism between what he called Brahma and the world. I'm not familiar enough with the philosophical tradition he was drawing on to know what Brahma was, but it seemed to be some kind of version of spirit. And the way he articulated it was in the form of a kind of three-line syllogism, in which one recognizes initially, of course, that there is the world out there apparently, and there is Brahma, the spirit, which seems to be in here. And the three-line syllogism he suggested was that you first acknowledge that the world is an illusion. You then say to yourself that only Brahman is real. And the third line is, Brahman is the world. And the third line kind of sort of resolves the first two lines. The first line appears to be, or the first two lines appear to be an appeal to good old-fashioned idealism, solipsism, I guess, in which there is no material world, there is only individual ideation, there is only thought. And the first two lines of that three-line gag seem to suggest that, but this third line where he says, or he quotes, I guess, only Brahman is real, closes the gap, so that I think we're intended to think at that point that the world and the self, or the body and the mind, sort of come together in that rather complicated little knot of logic. Well, I found in and of itself it's quite interesting at that, I think, but one of the things I found interesting about the way he presented it was he did this gesture which I've been trying to replicate whilst I've been doing this, and I'll just do again. He says, the world is an illusion, only Brahman is real, Brahman is the world. And this gesture, it has this sort of cyclic action to it. First identifies an external phenomenon, the world, dismisses it but acknowledges its apparent presence, and then starts again from saying only Brahman is real, so the source and the origin of everything is located close to the body and within the kind of center of the self. And then the third line pushes it back out, the Brahman is the world. So there's a sense in this, there's a sort of cycling of this logic. The direction of that cycle is from the source within the body, or within the self, within the person, within the individual, and the terminus, if that's the right word for this cycle, the next stage of that cycle, is out there. So there's a sense in which it flows in that direction. So to find the source, one goes inside and identifies the direction of that source as a kind of vectorial flow which leads out from the self and constructs the world, and then ultimately reflects back so that the gap is closed. But prior to that gap closing, we have to still, I think, see within that there is that direction. So for me, that would suggest
'a tradition which,
looks inside oneself for truth. It's part of that kind of mystical tradition, meditative tradition, in which it's that sort of look within thing. God is inside, and by following the logic of that line, one is achieves some kind of advaita or enlightened state. And I think that contrasts with some of the other mystical processes I've been interested in or read about, which don't acknowledge that, and which are more associated with near Advaita and with other kinds of traditions of enlightenment, Zen koan, for example, in which there is no, in which the contemplative tradition is not about looking inside oneself, it's about a relatively sudden rupture so that oneself disappears and the world suddenly pops into place. I can't really be more precise about that, but that's, to the extent I've had these experiences, that's the one that I've had. It's a sudden dissolution of the self in favour of a kind of panpsychic understanding of the world, which sort of folds back into oneself and becomes the self in that direction. So the flow is not in to out, it's more like a congealing of the out to in. I did read a really nice quotation, which I'll try to find when I get home, identifying two traditions. I think it was somebody called Stace who said it, who identifies those two traditions, one of which tries to find this enlightened state, or to come to this kind of truth, if you like, by mystical traditions which look inward, perhaps associated with the Jungian introspective, and another set of traditions which look outwards, cancel the self, if you like, and this would be the tradition of Plotinus and Harding and those guys, which cancel the self and look outwards, and that would not be associated with the Jungian introspective, but with the, what's the opposite of introspective? Extroverted, I guess. Yeah. Okay. I suppose the end result is the same, whether you drive on the left, whether you drive on the right, you still get to the same place, which is a kind of overview, or a kind of an additional dimension beyond this cycling, or beyond this in-out or out-in. I hate that word beyond. I wish I hadn't said beyond. Never mind, too late now.